So you might think of this attitude as militant. And in a way, that's what this really is. There's a new kind of militance in these black communities created by the Great Migration. There was lots of talk in these black communities of this new phrase called black power. A phrase that if Americans think of, they associate it with the 1960s, with the Black Panthers. But here we are in 1919, and both of these cartoons from a black newspaper are about black power. And over here, see that man walking towards black power? And here are the steps toward power. Self-reliance, determination, and unity. And you could very usefully think of those as characteristics of anybody who would call themselves a new Negro. Self-reliance, determination, and unity. During the war, in 1917, the Russian dictatorship had been overthrown by Russian communists. The Soviet Union was created. So Russia is no longer Russia. It is now this new nation, the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was an open, avowed, proud communist nation. Were rich people scared of the idea of communism before? Yes. But now, communists have actually taken over a country. And is that far more scary than people talking about communism? Yes. Yes. So, the Soviet Union announced that their goal was to spread communism around the world. And again, that is very frightening to rich people, because communists promise that everybody will be equal economically. And here we get to why Americans had another reason to be scared of communism. Communism said that human beings of whatever color or sex were all equal. Holy crap. Black people are equal to white people. Women are equal to men. They said that all human beings were equal. And so white supremacists in America had a double reason to be scared of communism. You know? They want to take my stuff, and they want to make black people equal. So, as black veterans started coming home in 1919, there was fear that maybe some of those black veterans had been contaminated, that's the way Americans talked about it, contaminated by these dangerous communist ideas. So that's part of what helped lead to the Red Summer. Second factor that led to the Red Summer was these rumors that Americans had heard that what had some of these black guys been doing in France? Right. They had been having sex with French women. So those were two factors that would lead to hostility toward black veterans when they come home. Fear of communism, fear that they've been having sex with French women. But there are other factors at play that allowed the Red Summer to take place. I guess if we think of those as number one and number two, right? Fear of communism, fear they've been sleeping with French women. A third factor was that in 1919, the economy suddenly slowed way down. What was the economy like during the war? Good. Right, it was doing great. Remember, unemployment disappeared. So why does it do so badly as soon as the war ends? And that was the whole reason for it doing well, right? Was to make the stuff you needed to fight a war. So when the economy slows down in 1919, that's at the same time that 4 million Americans are coming home from the war. And what do all those white veterans expect to have back? Their jobs. It's exactly the way they talk about it. I expect to have my job back. And so in 1919, there was a huge wave of strikes across the country, where workers went on strike to try to keep the higher wages they had gotten during the war years. And in city after city, in strike after strike, who did the employers replace the striking white workers with? Black people. And in city after city, what did white people say those black men were doing?
Good job.
Taking our jobs. Right. Taking our jobs. And so those factors help explain the wave of violence in 1919 that is known as the Red Summer. It was black people who called it the Red Summer. And they used red because they were talking about the amount of blood that was spilled in this summer. In the summer of 1919, there were 26 race riots across the country. 26 race riots. And many of them were in the North. Does the North have a long history of race riots like this? No. What made them possible? You got it. So when there weren't any black people in your city, surprisingly, there were no race riots. Right. But once 1 million black people have moved out of the South into New York and Chicago and Detroit, lots of these race riots and the Red Summer happened in the North. There were also, over this summer, 70 lynchings. The greatest wave of lynching in America since before whose activism to try to stop it?
Adam.
Right, since before Ida B. Wells. Of the 70 black people lynched in 1919, 10 of those 70 were veterans lynched in their military uniforms. What's that about? Why does the sight of a black veteran in uniform make some white people want to lynch him? Maybe. What else? Yeah, that guy's walking down the street like a man, and that makes white supremacists furious. So, this is a scene from one of the riots, and this is one of the terrible lynching photographs we looked at before. But this lynching actually happened in the Red Summer, in the summer of 1919. Have there been race riots before this? Yeah, we've seen lots of them, right? What makes the Red Summer so different than all that's come before is how effectively black people fought back. Black people armed themselves, organized themselves, and prepared to defend their houses, their families, and their neighborhoods. There was a big riot in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post published meeting places for the white mob. The D.C. police stepped in when white people were losing. And this is just impossible for me to really imagine. But at one point during the D.C. riot, there were these Model T Fords loaded up with white people in one car and black people in another. They were chasing each other through the streets, firing guns at each other, like careening through the streets of D.C., like 2 blocks from the Capitol. Arkansas was another one of the 26 riots of the Red Summer. And I included this one. I just wanted to show you these headlines, to show you what it would have been like if you were living at the time and, you know, weren't there and you just read about it. So look at this headline here. This is from Elaine. Negroes plan to kill all whites. Slaughter was to begin with 21 prominent men as the first victims. They even had a password and everything. Blacks had armed themselves and planned to kill every white person in sight when the plot was exposed. Now, everything in that headline there, guess which part of it historians have shown is true?
21.
Not that part.
They armed themselves.
Right. The one part in there that's true is that black people had armed themselves. And to white people, black people arming themselves feels like they're trying to kill white people. Just because they're trying to defend themselves. And so they interpret black people arming themselves as some huge plot to murder white people. There was no plot. The biggest riot of all the riots in the summer of 1919 happened in the city of Chicago. Does Chicago have segregation signs? No, not in the South. No signs up anywhere. But at the beach on Lake Michigan, most people don't think of Chicago as having beaches if you've never been to Chicago. But, you know, it's on the Great Lakes, so there are beaches. You can swim in the summertime. And at the beach in Chicago, there are no signs up. But everybody understood that there was a black section of the beach and a white section of the beach. But no signs, like you'd have in the South, right? You just stay in your section. And the way people understood it, that line stretched out into the lake. Well, on a hot summer day, a black teenager was swimming in the lake and crossed over into what white people took to be their section of the lake. All of this is really absurd. But a group of white teenagers attacked the kid in the water. And they dragged him up onto the shore, beating and kicking him. And on the shore, they beat him to death. As a group of white police officers stood by and watched. A black teenager was beaten to death on the beach. And now, an angry black crowd gathered. And who are they most pissed at? The police.
Police.
Right. Actually, we're more pissed at the police than the teenagers who did the beating. And so, the black crowd at the beach chased the police officers away. And now, all hell broke loose in Chicago. White people went to invade the black neighborhood. What's the black neighborhood in Chicago?
Southside.
South Side, right? So a white mob invades the South Side, going block to block, burning places. But here, this was not the first city to see a riot this summer. And black people in Chicago were anticipating this was going to happen at some point. So they were organized. They had armed themselves, and there were some veterans who were leading the resistance. So when the white mob invaded the South Side, for the first time in our entire class, black people defended their neighborhood. They defended their neighborhood, and they drove the invading white mob out of the South Side. And then, they didn't just defend their neighborhood, they counterattacked and invaded the white neighborhood next door to theirs.